When converting decimals to fractions, it's important to remember that really all you are doing is representing the same value in a different way. For example, 5/10 as a decimal is the exact same value as 1/2 when it's in fraction form. So it's almost like they're just nicknames for the same thing. This cat's freaking out because he tried to convert a decimal to a fraction. It's not that hard. You're going to understand this really quickly and really easily. When you were in elementary school, you worked with these decimal models, these 10 by 10 grids. Each one of these grids contains 100 small squares, and the grid as a whole represents exactly that, one whole. So this first grid that's shaded in all the way, we would represent as 1. And then we're going to need our little decimal point. On this second grid, I have 25 little squares that are shaded. So this would be 1.25 as a decimal, or $1.25 if you want to think of it as money. If I was going to write that as a fraction, I would have 1 whole, then I have 25 out of 100 little squares on the second model shaded. So I would have 1 and 25 hundredths. This, of course, can be simplified, and you always want to make sure that you write your fractions in simplest form. I can divide my numerator and my denominator by 25, so that's what I'm going to do. I keep my whole number. 25 divided by 25 would be 1, and 100 divided by 25 is 4. So 1 and 1/4 and 1 and 25 hundredths are equivalent fractions. The official way to convert a decimal to a fraction, you would need to use a place value chart. Okay? The abbreviation for a place value chart would be PVC. All you would have to do is simply place your number on the place value chart and read it. If you can read the number, then you can write the number. Okay? Then, of course, you have to remember that you have to simplify if possible. So here we're going to use this decimal, 0 and 5/10. Well, my 0 would belong here on my place value chart, right in front of the decimal point. This is the ones place, as you probably remember. My 5 would go right here after the decimal point. This is the tenths place. So to read this decimal, we would say 0, the decimal point makes us say and, 5/10. So to write 5/10 as a fraction, it's simply 5/10, 5/10. Well, 5 and 10 can both be divided by 5. So when I simplify, I end up with 1/2, which is just like what we saw on that first slide. So now let's look at these these decimals as we turn them into fractions. This first one has 2 digits after the decimal point. So that means I'm going to have my 35 here, the decimal point, the 3, and the 5. So we would read this as 35 hundredths. So it's 35 hundredths. Is that in simplest form? No. Both 35 and 100 can be divided by 5. 35 divided by 5 is 7. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So this is 7/20, which then is in simplest form. Sometimes we're going to have a whole number along with our decimal. Don't let that panic you. It's okay. All we have to do is simply bring it over in front of our fraction. It's going to be the whole part of our mixed number. Then I have a decimal and a 6. So if I was to put this on our place value chart, this would be 3 and 6. The 3 is in the units or the ones place. The 6 is in the tenths place. So we would read this as 3 and 6/10. So here's our 3 and there would be 6/10. This is not in simplest form either. 6 and 10 can both be divided by 2. So we carry over our whole number. Don't ever leave your whole number behind. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So we end up with 3 and 3/5. 3 3/5. If you label your place value chart with the correct values, it makes it easier for you to read. Here's a couple practice problems. I'm going to show you a little bit of a shortcut that can help you with these. One thing that you can do is when you look at the decimal, go ahead and bring over your whole number. In this case, it's a 4. We know we're going to have a fraction. Underneath the decimal point, I'm going to write a 1. The decimal point gets a 1 every time. Then I'm going to write a 0 underneath every other digit in that number. So the 7 gets a 0. So now what is behind my decimal becomes my numerator. What is underneath becomes my denominator. So this becomes 4 7/10. This is in simplest form, so this is my final answer. For number 3, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring my whole number of 3 over. I'm going to put a 1 under the decimal point. The 6 gets a 0. The 2 gets a 0. And even this 0 gets a 0. All of this behind the decimal becomes my numerator, 620. All of this underneath becomes my denominator, 1,000. Then I have to simplify. I'm going to start with 10. Both 620 and 1,000 end in 0, so I know I can divide by 10. So 620 divided by 10 is 62. 1,000 divided by 10 is 100. Well, I can divide again. I can divide by 2 this time. Keep my whole number. I'm going to go ahead and move it down beneath here. So I keep my whole number. 62 divided by 2 is 31, and 100 divided by 2 is 50. So we end up with 3 31 over 50. At this point, I want you to pause the video, and I want you to go ahead and complete the rest of the problems, and then when you restart the video, you'll be able to check your work. Make sure you pause. No cheating. I'm watching you. All right, check your work. Make sure that you have all of the final answers like I do, that you have simplified all the way. And if you have any questions, make sure you let me know.